Hey everyone, welcome to my channel. Today I'm gonna talk about the Anglo Norman period along with its background and features of literature. So let's get started. Norman period of Middle English literature is divided into four periods: early period, 13th century, 14th century, 15th century. Thus, the medieval period runs from the end of 4th century to the English Renaissance of the late 15th century. The early period. The early portion of the medieval period is dominated by Anglo-Saxon. That early portion is known as the Old English period. The Old English period came to an end with the Norman invasion of 1066 AD. Normans spoke a dialect of French later called Anglo Norman. Normans defeated the Anglo-Saxon king at the Battle of Hastings. Background: Normans conquered that part of England that was conquered by Anglo-Saxons. Between 1011 to 1500, French culture was dominated the overall Europe. French language caused a classic impact on English culture. French becomes the prominent language of Parliament. The Roman dialect of ruling classes mixed with the Anglo-Saxon. The Anglo-Saxon and Anglo-Norman underwent a gradual transition into the Middle Age through slow and gradual transitions. Background: Poetry was the principal literary expression in early period. Several poems in early Middle English were written in Old English. This early age was interested in prosaic and linguistic purposes. 13th century. 13th century continues in tradition of Anglo-Saxon prose directed towards ordinary people rather than the elite society. They were introduced to Roman romances, narrative verses that retain information of heroic tradition. Anti-papal attitude related to Pope of Roman Church and a growing sense of nationalism helped to fuel native literary talent. English literature comes into its own. Most of the literature of that were in Latin. Scholar A. G. Rigg says about the period of 13th century, they formed a new kind of intellectual elite. Their evangelical fervor and commitment to academic training contributed to the rise of the English universities. Hence, in this century they helped to increase literacy and the stock of books in England. 14th century. There was a shift from religious to secular writing. In this century, literature comes to its own. The most important development of their purpose is the wholesomeness replacement of the French language in government laws by the English language. This is the century of important figures of literature such as John Gower, Geoffrey Chaucer, and William Langland. 15th century. Literary work was mostly satirical. There were introduction of morality plays and mystery plays. In Anglo-Norman literature, writings are in Old English. The major focus of the literary works were mostly on sadness, loss, death, vanity of human grandeur, sublimity, etc. Medieval period also said to be the Dark Age covering 15th century Battle of Hastings to the Battle of Bosworth. Feudalism dominated the society and also reflected in the literature of the period. Theme of chivalry is also the most dominant theme of the literary text of that time. Important figures: William Langland, A Vision of Piers the Plowman. This poem is a satire on the corrupt religious practices. It throws light on the ethical problems of the day. Feudal system was his ideal and he thought that all would be well if different orders of the society do their duties. John Gower. He played an important role in the development of English poetry. He was mainly a narrative poet and his most important work is Confession Amantis, which is the conversation between poet and a divine interpreter. He performed the fiction of establishing the form of English as a thoroughly equipped medium of literature.